Today we have Dina Horowitz. She's a regulatory and operational point of contact for any WVU studies with the WCG IRB oversight. She has been with WCG since 2013 and worked closely with local IRBs in her prior role. She is located in the Research Triangle area in North Carolina. All right, you can go ahead and get started. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm recognizing some names on the attendees list here, so I hope that everybody's doing well. I know we're getting close to being out of this crazy time with the pandemic going on, so I'm glad that we're able to do this training session virtually. And for those who have not met me, now you can see my face, connect face to the name. I am in your time zone, so I know that if you've worked with WIRB in the past, or what was formerly known as WIRB in the past, a lot of those staff members are out on the West Coast. So if you have something urgent, escalated, anything that's regulatory in nature, you are welcome to contact me directly. I'm going to put my information up at the end of the slide deck, and the slides will be provided to you after this is done. So we'll go ahead and jump in, and I'm going to shut off my camera for now because I want to make sure that we focus on the slides. So I'll turn it back on for questions. Cool. All right. So what we're going to do today is walk through our new Connexus portal, talk about what's new. We're going to mainly talk about the new submission workflow, some need to know information for the transition, as well as where to find resources and support. Okay, so back in the fall of 2019, what we did was we took feedback from our top submitters, people who are using our legacy MyConnexus system on a day-to-day basis, just to get a sense of how their workflow worked from their end and how legacy Connexus integrated with that, as well as what they wish was different in the legacy Connexus system. So based off of that feedback, we actually went and built an entirely new system. So this is not an update to the legacy MyConnexus system. This is actually a completely new portal. This is the dashboard. We're going to go over this in more detail very soon. But you can already see at a glance how different this is from the legacy system. It's way more submission focused. What you see when you log in is what you need to take action on at that point in time. We've also updated our forms so that most of them are integrated into the online system as opposed to having to fill those out externally. Now, on that note, let's talk about all the differences that are between the legacy MyConnexus system that you're used to working in and the WCG IRB Connexus system, which is going to be the new system replacing it. Now, the first and most important thing I wanted to go over, and I'm going to reiterate this throughout the presentation, is the difference between access necessary in order to submit a new PI for initial review. In the legacy MyConnexus system, what you're used to is requesting access for the study level workspace from either the sponsor CRO or from client services so that you can submit a new PI. Now, in the new portal, study level access is not necessary to submit a new PI, and it also should not be requested. Now, the reason why is because if you're granted study level access by a sponsor CRO, what that does is actually grant you access to all sites on the study, which is not necessary if you're just managing your own local WVU site. So that being said, all you need when you're submitting a new PI is that WCG protocol number. So I will go through that more later on in the slide deck, but I wanted to just hammer home that point and repeat it throughout the presentation that you no longer need to request study level access in order to submit a new PI on an existing study. And that's helpful too, because it removes a step that you need to take. Now, to move on here, in the past, when you would request access to study workspaces or PI workspaces, the addition of those contacts would not just be sent to the sponsors or CROs, where if you're requesting that outside the system. When you request it in the system, that request would go to client services. In the new portal, access is entirely managed by the people who have access in the Connexus system. So in other words, when you send a request to get access to a PI workspace, for example, that request does not go to client services. It actually goes to whoever's a manager for that PI. Similarly, if you requested study level access, which again, it would not be pretty common that you would do that, but that would be sent to anyone who's a manager for that study. And there can be multiple managers, and we'll go over access levels very soon. I'd also like to mention, I forgot to mention this at the beginning, but what we'll do today, the way this is going to be formatted, is we'll go through the slides, and then afterwards we'll open it up for questions. You're welcome to put your questions in the chat box as we go along if you would like. Otherwise, we can kind of wait until the end. And at that point, you can either put your questions in the chat or you can unmute and actually ask the question out loud. Okay, to move on here, in the legacy MyConnexus system, you would download a form externally, a PDF, a Word document, fill that out, and then upload that back into the portal. In the new system, most of our commonly required forms are now integrated entirely into the online system. So that means you can start a form directly in the portal without having to fill one out externally and then uploading it back in. Finally, the last biggest difference is that the workflow has changed. So in the old portal, what you're used to doing is going to a study or site workspace and starting a submission from there. In the new portal, there's a make a submission button from the dashboard that you're going to click on and then triage the submission from there. So in other words, there's one spot where you would start to make a submission. You don't need to go to that study or site workspace in order to make that submission. So we'll talk about how you sign in. What you may have noticed as of last fall is we have updated our website. So since previously WCG had 6 independent separate IRBs under our purview, we have now merged into one single IRB, and that's WCG IRB. So we have updated our website. This is our main website. And on that website at the top is a login to WCG IRB Connexus link. Now, the direct link is here. So if you want to save this, this is how you get directly to the new portal. If you need to download an external form for any reason, those will still be maintained and they are on our website. And you'd find them under how to submit. It's a menu here, and then download IRB forms. Under that how to submit link is actually also our download resources section, which contains our translated short forms. I always like to mention this to people because I'm seeing a lot more unexpected translation needs for consenting subjects that don't speak English, on COVID studies especially. So if you do need to grab a translated short form, then you can do that from our website as well. And if you have any questions about the short form process, there's more information in our guide for researchers, and you can always reach out to me for assistance. In terms of signing in, this is a very important step. I want to make sure that you all are aware of this as you're signing in for the first time. If you've already signed in, that's great. But for those of you who have not signed into the new portal yet, here are the steps to do so. So the first thing you're going to do when you get to this page is click Forgot Password. You're going to enter in the same registered email address that you have in the legacy MyConnexus system, and then reset your password, accept the terms and conditions, and sign in. This is really important that you use your same registered email address as you have in the legacy system, because this builds a bridge between the old portal and the new portal. And that means all of the studies or sites that you have access to in the old portal will automatically sync into the new one. In this system, your username is your email address, so you don't need to maintain a separate username. And if you are a brand new user and you've never logged into the legacy MyConnexus system before, you can just use the create a new account option to set up your new account. So now we'll go into the submission process, and we'll kind of start by actually navigating through the dashboard and more information about what the different roles are for each site or PI. So when you log in, we're back at this dashboard, which we previewed earlier in the slide deck. So we'll start at the top. There is a menu up here where you can navigate among your submissions, your sites, and your resources. I'm skipping over studies, and again, that's because you would not normally have study level access. So you're actually going to access all of your approved PIs via the sites option. We'll talk about that more later, but for now, I want to go through the rest of the dashboard. It will tell you if you have any new updates on your submissions. You have that Make a Submission button, which will start any type of submission. Request access, if you need to request access to a certain PI workspace. You can search for anything recent below. And there are 3 tabs here. So Needs Action is going to show you anything that's been recently transmitted or is on hold and requires your attention. In Progress will show anything that you recently submitted to the IRB and that's currently being processed. So that means no action is required from your end and it's with the IRB. Drafts is a tab where you can pick up on a form that you have left off on. So the system does automatically save a copy of your partially filled out form as you're going through those drafts. And if you need to get back to it later, you just click on that tab and then continue with your draft. So here, each submission is represented as a card. So it's called the card view. It contains some basic information about the submission. So the sponsor protocol ID, the study title, what kind of submission it is. If it's on hold, it'll have that hold date information, the reason why it was on hold. If you need to look at outcome documents that were transmitted, you can click on the View Outcome Documents button that appears, or the View Submission button that appears. If you don't like the card view, or if you would prefer a different view, there are actually 2 different ways to look at this information. So I'll direct your attention to these options here. So this reflects that we're looking at the card view. If you click on the box next to it with the lines in it, it will change it to table view. So here's an up close of one of those submission cards. And the table view will show the same information. It's just represented slightly differently. So just depending on what your preference is, you have that little level of customization where you can look in and see what submissions are requiring your attention. So we'll talk about the Make a Submission button. When you click on that, it will bring you to this page. So there's 3 main options for starting a new submission. This first one is Add Study and Related Documents. This is if you're submitting a brand new protocol that we have never reviewed at WCG IRB before. I don't think that you all will be using that option too frequently, unless for some reason you're the first site to submit that protocol, or if it's something investigator initiated that's coming from WVU. That would be the only time you'd use Add Study and Related Documents. If you're not sure if we have a study on file or not, even if we're not the central IRB, if the sponsor just said, well, WCG IRB isn't the central IRB, we may have your protocol on file. Another site may have already submitted it. If you're ever curious if we have something on file, you can always email me or client services and we'll help you out with that. And I only say that because if you kick off a brand new protocol submission and it turns out we already have your study on file, then you did a lot of extra work that you didn't need to do. So to avoid doing that extra work, you're always welcome to reach out and find out if we have your study on file. Now, for an existing study that we have on file, if you're submitting a new PI for initial review, you're going to use this option, Add PI/Site. If you're submitting for an existing PI that you have already approved at WCG IRB, and you need to send in maybe an amendment for a consent update or a promptly reportable information form, you would use this option, which is Add Documents to Study/Site. Now we'll talk about the Request Access button. So if needed, you can request access to studies. More than likely, what you'll be requesting access to is sites. You may have caught on that sites and PIs are interchangeable in the system. So when you're requesting access to a site, that means you're requesting access to a PI workspace. When you make a request to be added to a site, anyone who is a manager for that site will receive the request and be able to act on that request. So anyone who is a manager would be responsible for ensuring that the appropriate people have access for that PI. And they also can invite other users to have access to that PI. And we'll look at that a little bit later in this session. I will reemphasize this again, but study level access and study workspace access is not needed if you're trying to submit a new PI for that study. So it would be very rare that you're requesting study level access unless you're truly managing a protocol from WVU. In terms of roles, any access that you have existing in the legacy system will sync into the new system. The permission levels basically reflect what's in the legacy system. They are manager, submitter, and read only. So we'll look at what does that mean from the site level. Manager access means that you can manage access for other people, make submissions, and view and download submission and outcome documents. Submitter will allow a user to do anything except for manage access for others. And then read only will just allow those people to view or download submission and outcome documents. Regardless of what access level you have, you will still receive notifications. So even if you are read only, you'll still get notifications from the system. So now we'll dive into how to start an initial review submission for a new PI on an existing multi-center trial, which we already have reviewed and on file. So when you're doing that, again, you're going to click make a submission and then hit add PI/site. So that's this option outlined in red here. So this is very important and goes back to what I was saying about study level access, which is not needed in order to submit a new PI. So when you click to add PI/site, it's going to bring you to a page to ask you to find the study. Since you won't have access to the study, instead of messing with this search box here, you're just going to go right over to this window that says don't have access to the study. You may enter the IRB tracking ID. So click on that link that says enter IRB tracking ID. That will bring you here. So all you need is that WCG protocol number in order to make a submission. It usually starts with 20 and then has 6 digits after it, but that's all you need in order to submit. So you'll enter that in here, hit search, it'll appear, and then you can continue on with your submission. So I'll go over some of the questions that are in the online form. They are basically reflecting what's in the PDF form that you're used to seeing. It's just in a slightly different format. So I will go over some of the important ones to pay attention to, but I won't go over every single question on the form. You can always start a draft later on if you're more of a, I really just need to get in there and take a look at everything. You're always welcome to go in and start a draft and then delete it once you're done, but that would allow you to look at all the questions in there. So in terms of contacts, this is the same as it is in the other form. You just want to make sure you add all of the day-to-day contacts. So anybody who needs to receive the official IRB correspondence for that study. So that would be study coordinators, sponsor CRO contacts, and not all study staff have to be listed. We just need those who are doing those day-to-day operations for the study. If needed, you can always manage contacts later to add folks as read only if they are study staff, but they're not doing that day-to-day operational stuff for it. For research locations, this one is way more self-explanatory. I just always like to remind people to include everywhere where research is engaged and that you double check this information for accuracy. We do include all of the approved locations on the certificate of action. So you want to make sure that everything's correct, because if you submit something incorrectly and have to change it later, that does constitute a change in research. For certificates of training, again, nothing's changed here. We don't require certificates of training to be submitted to WCG. We just need the CV and medical license of the PI if they have a medical license, and if it's not already on file with us. So if it is already on file, you don't need to submit that. We just need you to attest that everybody on the study team has the appropriate training by hitting yes to this question. Now for institutional services, you'll always mark yes to this question because WVU does have a master services agreement with WCG. So in here, you would put West Virginia University, and here you would put 99059. So that's your institution number. You are welcome to write that down, but we will send you these slides afterwards, or Carrie and Debbie will distribute those to you. What this does is it tells our login staff that all of the WVU process rules apply for this study. So it just makes things a little bit quicker in processing, which is why I recommend putting the number in, even though it's not required. Now, when you get to the point where it's asking about submission of a written consent form, it will ask you how you want us to process your consent. So under consent form processing, where it asks if you have pre-approved language on file with the IRB, the answer to that is yes. We do maintain a WVU consent template language document, which we make sure is applied accordingly to your consents. So you would hit yes to that question. In terms of how you want us to process your consent forms, you'll normally be submitting a redlined or tracked consent. That's this third option here. I'm submitting a consent with requested language changes shown as track changes. So that would be the option you would choose. If you're submitting anything else, then you would hit other and just indicate what exactly you're sending to us. Now, again, I won't go through every single question, but as you go through the form, it will determine what kind of documents you need to submit based on how you answer the questions. And that list would appear in the document checklist. Obviously, this one is particularly short, just for the test that I had put in for this one. But this checklist will show you everything you have to submit. And in the new portal, you can drag and drop files right into this box, or you can hit click to upload, and you can upload multiple files at once. When you do that, when you add all the documents, it'll just ask you to add in a document type. And so you would add a type for each one, and then you would move forward with that. Be sure to include your institutional sign-off, which is really in the form of that WVU tracking number that you pull from your internal system. So the last step before you submit, the screen will allow you to download a draft PDF of the form you just filled out. So if you want to take a look at all of the answers to the questions you just filled out, you can see that in the PDF by clicking this button. And if you're ready to submit, you would hit submit for IRB review in the bottom corner, and a confirmation ID will appear within a few minutes, and you'll also get an email notification that you've made a submission. Okay, so that really covers the initial submission. I won't go into this one in as much depth, but I do just want to point you in the direction. If you need to send in a change in research, promptly reportable information, whatever it might be, for an existing approved PI on file, then you would use this option, which is add documents to study/site. From there, you triage what kind of submission you're making. So if it's a change in research, you would hit that. If it's a promptly reportable information, you'd hit that. If you need a translation request, and so on. I will mention the only form that we have not integrated, one of the commonly used forms that we've not integrated, is our continuing review form. So you will continue to receive that PDF via email, and you'll still be expected to fill that out and upload it back into the system. But most of these others have incorporated directly into the portal. Great, so we'll talk about how to navigate within your workspaces by focusing on this top menu here. So we've taken a very close look at the dashboard. Let's take a look at submissions. Submissions will show you every submission that you've made. You can filter by date, You can search by different qualifiers. When you click on the submission name, that will bring you to a page about that submission. So there will be a tracker to tell you where the submission's at in the process. You'll have your confirmation ID, some basic info about the submission. Submitted sites will show you the PI you submitted for. Submitted documents will show you the documents you submitted. And then outcome documents will be in this tab once they're available. We are going to skip over studies. You don't generally need to be navigating from the studies option. Instead, you're going to go right to the sites option to see all of your approved PIs. When you click on sites, it'll bring you to a list of all the PIs that you have access to. You can also search by your WVU tracking number. If you want to, your institution tracking number will appear in this column here. So when you click on a PI name, it will bring you to a page about that PI. So you can see all the basic information up top, all the submissions made for that PI, the outcome documents, and the contacts. In the outcome documents section, I actually want to make sure that you all know that each of these bold options at the top of the column are sortable. So if you click on where it says transmitted, for example, you can sort by the most recently transmitted. Automatically, they're sorted by most recently reviewed. And if for some reason you wanted to sort by, file name, you could do that. You can always search in this section as well. But it's not entirely obvious that these are ways you can sort the columns. So I just want to make sure that you all are aware of that. Now, if you're a manager for this PI, you're going to see that Manage Contacts button in the corner. When you click on that, it'll bring you to where you can manage contacts for that PI. So anyone who has access to this PI will be listed here. If you need to invite people, you can add them. You can add multiple people at once, actually, by separating them by commas. When you start to type in someone's name or email address, it does start to auto-populate. You'll see a list, and you'll be able to add those people. You can change their permissions, so select if they're going to be manager, submitter, read only, and then click invite to add them. If you need to remove anyone, you just check off these boxes and hit remove selected. If you need to update anyone's access, you use the pencil icon. And if you need to check out your requests, so if someone has requested access to your PI, you can click requests, and then you can approve or deny the pending access requests. Now, finally, resources is a helpful place to go if you are wanting to get a little more familiarized with the system. There is a full user guide, there are how-to videos, and there are quick reference guides under downloadable documents about specific tasks. There's also a link back to our website if you need it. Okay, so we are close to wrapping up, and I wanted to talk about some additional items as we transition into this new system. So for a limited time, both systems are functioning simultaneously. So the legacy Connexus system is actually planning to be shut off by the end of June, which is why I want to make sure that everyone's familiarized before you get into the new system. Now, with that in mind, if you have a draft that you're working on right now, let's say you have an initial review form that you're almost done with, that you're about to submit, my recommendation is to just have that just submitted in the legacy system. Finish out anything that you've already started working on. There's no need to duplicate work here. Now, if you decide that you want to go into the new system and you already have a draft in the legacy system, the draft will not sync over into the new system. So the only things that are syncing over are active studies, not any drafts. There also might be a delay when you log in for the first time. If you don't see all of your studies, the moment that you log in, you might just need to wait a few minutes. It could take up to a day if you have access to a lot of studies or sites. So just keep that in mind. Now, again, all active studies will sync over, and the only studies that won't sync over are those that have been closed for more than 3 years. We went over this at the beginning, but I'll just remind you, when you're logging in for the first time, you want to make sure you use that forgot password option and use the same registered email address that you have in the legacy system to log in for the first time. This will ensure that you get all of your information synced over correctly. And if you're creating a new account, obviously you just hit create a new account. One other thing we've changed is we are no longer sending a link to outcome documents. When you get a notification that outcome documents are posted, you'll get an email that lists the outcome documents available, but you do have to log in order to download them. And that's just for extra security. So finally, I know I talked about this multiple times throughout the presentation. I'm sure I'm bugging you with it at this point, but I like to make sure that everybody knows, because this is one of the biggest adjustments that I've seen people have in the new system. As a reminder, study level access is not needed, nor should it be requested for submitting a new site on an existing protocol. If you are granted study level access by accident by the sponsor CRO, you may find yourself inundated with a lot of notifications about sites that don't apply to you. So I do not recommend requesting access. And if you do find yourself in that situation, please contact me immediately so I can help fix that. You would really only have study level access if you're managing a brand new protocol, something investigator initiated perhaps from WVU. And finally, if you need to navigate and see, okay, where are my approved PIs then? If I don't have study level access, where do I go? Click on sites at the top of the screen. Do not click on studies. You're not going to be able to find what you need there. Go to sites, and from there, you'll be able to see all of your approved PIs and all of their outcome documents. Okay, so that wraps up the presentation. So I wanted to open it up for questions. I'm going to look in the chat to see if there's anything here, and I don't see any questions here. So feel free to ask them in the chat, or you can just ask them.
This is Lindsay. I have a question.
Yeah.
For the initial review questionnaire, I know when we would, on the PDF on the old form, when we would select central, it would remove the billing that we needed to fill out the billing. And I've noticed that when we select that it's the central IRB for the study, it doesn't remove the billing from the initial review questionnaire now. Even, do we need to fill in the sponsor's billing information, or can we leave that blank?
So if you've indicated that we're the central,
yeah.
If you want to go ahead and just leave that blank, you can put in special instructions that there is a special instructions section at the end. So you can put in there like billing is going to the sponsor. I think that's totally acceptable.
Okay.
Especially if you don't, if it's going to hold up your submission, if you don't know that information,
exactly.
and if the bills are going to the sponsor anyway,
okay,
then you can just put that in that that as a note.
Thank you.
Yeah. If you do get pushback on that, by the way, please loop me in.
Okay, I will. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. What other questions do you all have?
Yeah, hi, Dina. I have a question. This is Ron Reed, and I'll turn my video on here in a second.
Hi, Ron.
Yeah, hi. How are you? I've written a couple of protocols. They're not quite complete, but these are investigator-initiated protocols. I'll be the sponsor, but I'm still looking for funding. My question is, am I using this system? And I'm going to be including other sites other than WVU. So. And I've got to contact those sites to see if they would use the WCG platform. And is this also something then that I could do for an investigator-initiated protocol as such?
Yes. So, and this doesn't have, I just want to clarify, does this have any NIH funding or no?
No.
Okay. So yes, you can still use this platform. I guess from a perspective of study management, I would recommend advising your sites like, hey, it would be great if everybody just used the single IRB for this study, because then if you submit an amendment for all sites, it can just automatically apply to all those sites. If you need any help managing this as you're starting up and going along with it, definitely reach out to me. But yeah, you would do the same process. It's just slightly different in terms of what option you select. So you would just click add study and related documents so that you're initiating the submission of a new protocol. And it'll ask you protocol related questions and you'll send us that. Initially, I would say you would want to just make sure that we approve the protocol and you as the lead site. And then from there, as you're adding more sites on, presuming that they each have their own PI, then they would submit accordingly. So we can take that offline if you want to ping me after this, and then I can help provide more information about the process.
Okay. Okay. Also, I notice in your email that you have Western IRB. So what's the connection, or is Western IRB now a part of WCG IRB?
Yeah, no, great question. I can totally understand that this is confusing, since I think a lot of people in the industry are very familiar with WIRB and Western IRB and that naming convention. So back in 2012, WIRB and Copernicus Group basically joined forces and started WCG, and we've expanded from being just an IRB company to being a total clinical services organization. We have 29 companies and 6 IRBs. So back in the fall, we switched from having these 6 independent IRBs, which is like Western IRB, Copernicus, Aspire, Midlands, a lot of IRBs all over the country, and we are now just one WCG IRB. So my email extension is still at werb.com because they just haven't changed it yet. But my initial employment was the account manager for WERB. But now we've switched over to WCG IRB. I'm sure my email will change at some point, but
Okay.
it hasn't yet.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. What other questions do you all have? And also on that note, on the note of what Ron was saying, if you all do ever find yourselves as the lead site for a new NIH multi-center trial, contact me before you submit, because we do custom budgets for those. So just reach out to me and I'll connect you with the right person so that we can get you a budget before you submit. Looking in the chat. I don't see anything here. Anything else that y'all can think of? All right, Carrie, should we call it, or what do you think? Oh, you're muted, my friend. It's okay.
Thank you. Sorry. Yeah, I just wanted to remind everybody that if you haven't put your name and email in the chat box, please do that and indicate if you need CEs. Also, just a couple upcoming trainings next week. We have new hire orientation on Thursday, April 15th, from 8:45 to noon. And then also on Friday, April the 16th, we have Clinical Trials Toolkit Series Unplugged, a frank conversation about clinical trials from 12 to 1. So if you haven't registered and you want to, please contact me and I'll get you registered, okay? But thank you, Dina. That was awesome.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. Again, if you all have any questions, I'm here to help. If you didn't get my email address, you can get it from Gretchen McMaster's team, and Carrie and Debbie also have my information. So I hope everybody has a great weekend.